Of course, a glorious day here in Cape Town. It is going to be hot, I can tell you. Before 8 o'clock, we were already scurrying, searching for shade and air conditioners. So it's only going to get worse. But the heat's going to be turned up in more ways than one, because there are great expectations, at least from some quarters, for what President Cyril Ramaphosa will have to say in the State of the Nation address tonight. In other quarters, there are no expectations, because some people feel that this makes no material difference to their lives. But I can tell you some of the things that people often look forward to with the State of the Nation address, and I suppose it speaks to who we are and the people and what they are listening out for. The announcement, for example, with regard to grants and pensions. People always look forward to those sorts of announcements in terms of what's going to happen with the social compact that we have overall with government as well. And those are some of the things to look out for. No doubt, Eskom will be top of the agenda given what we are going through in terms of energy challenges in the country. And speaking of, I'm still joined by our analyst Dick Forsland and Asanda Ngwasheng. And if I can start with you there, Asanda, on the energy situation. Many a loan being taken out in order to try and alleviate the energy crisis in South Africa. But how should the president characterize this particular situation, especially given that he set up committees? Loans have been offered to South Africa and taken, granted. There are some grants, so to speak, as well for this particular purpose. But how would you like to see the president address this matter?
I mean, I think I was actually part of, I actually participated in one of the presidential just transition kind of road shows in Durban last year. And what really stood out for me was the fact that there seemed to be a desire to kind of quickly go through the public participation process without necessarily wanting to really engage and hear what people had to say. And when I look back to what people were saying during those hearings and what is actually emerging, there isn't a match and there isn't a clear correlation between what people were saying we need to be considering in this just transition and what is actually happening. I mean, we are sitting in a situation where government has just received millions of rands from the US, from EU, etc., for a just transition. There's very little transparency about how much of it is grant, how much of it is loan, what are the repayment terms, and so on and so forth. And this is yet another case where future young people, future generations who haven't even started working are going to have to pay back these loans, and we are indebting our children and our children's children, and there doesn't seem to be consideration around that. There also seems to be hands already out for this money that has come out, which is meant to build a new transition. And some of the plans that I've heard about, they really worry me, because there doesn't seem to be innovative thinking around how do we begin to maybe build the new cities that he's talking about, you know, in terms of having that funding and using it to revive existing economies, but also build new economies. There seems to be a desire to just plow back money into the same old things without thinking about what is the longevity of this and how does it really contribute to the just transition and to ensuring that our current energy crisis needs are met. Because we also are in this weird position where, you know, globally, people are now even starting to open up coal mines, which is problematic, but that's what they're doing. And we are shutting down our mines without having 100% considered what is the impact on the economy, and are we even ready to be doing this, particularly when we're in the middle of a crisis and we're dealing with basics like people providing subpar coal, which then has an impact on the quality and the amount, the kind of production that is possible. So it's really quite a baffling you know, situation, and the fact that we've just declared they're declaring a state of national disaster is going to make things worse, because it means their levels of transparency, their levels of stringent regulations and kind of limits are not going to be there. And so we may only find out in 5 years' time how much money there actually was, what the terms and conditions for them them were and how they were actually spent, in the same way that we are slowly finding out that, wait a minute, in the Eastern Cape there actually was widespread corruption up to 23 million if you read the latest report on the on the Special Investigative Unit, which didn't come out in 2022 when we were looking at all the other tenders. And so in 5 years' time, we're going to be here again talking about how much money was wasted, who became a billionaire overnight, and so on and so on. And that is what's depressing. It's a never-ending cycle that repeats itself that we can predict. I could write the script. It's like a Netflix show at this point. And that's what frustrates and depresses people. And even especially because we are in the middle of a global crisis. And so there's not just austerity in South Africa. There's austerity globally. And the fact that it's global means in South Africa it's having an even harsher effect because we have corrupt politicians who are not going to take in the money we have and use it effectively.
But I suppose, Dick, on the other hand, the problem is that we are perpetually outraged as South Africans, but we don't do anything about it. What does that say about, for example, the strength of civil society in South Africa when things just continue over and over again? You know, I was reading up on some things, and back in 2018, President Ramaphosa on a trip to the UK meeting with the Prime Minister Theresa May then, there was 857 million rand that was agreed on, a deal that was meant to help South Africa improve its business environment. 857 million. Can we account for it? Do we know how it was spent, where it was spent, when?
No, I think one demand from civil society, from the public, should of course be to make all these loan agreements completely public. And I mean, you can't refer to sort of business competition, that is a competitive situation, so you shouldn't for business reasons disclose some of these agreements. There is no competitor to the IMF or to the World Bank. It should just be made public so that all the conditions and terms should be published. But I mean, I think that is just a small step. I think, I mean, as Alternative Information Development Center, we have been, I shouldn't say campaigning, but we have been speaking about for a long time about the internal resources in South Africa that should be available to the government if you change the policy of the government employee pension fund, for example, if you use the 150 billion surplus in the unemployment insurance fund and so on. There's no need for all this foreign lending, which it can be very dangerous. Even if the interest rates are low, it can be very dangerous if the value of the rand against the dollar and the euro deteriorates. And we spoke in the break. We spoke about the World Bank loan for building Medupe in 2010, and I told you I've looked at this loan. And at that time, it was worth about 27 billion rand. And now, after 13 years, when there's been a payback of 25 billion rand in interest rates and so on, the loan has not decreased. It has increased in value to 42 billion rand 13 years later. Why? Because the value of the rand to the dollar has plummeted. At that time, it was 750 per dollar, and now it's around 17 rand per dollar. And that is why it's so dangerous to amass all this, to pile up these international loans. I mean, previously, the Treasury commended itself in the budget reviews for having so low exposure to foreign lending, but now it's going up.
I'll tell you what, and interesting points being made by our analysts, but of course, I guess it raises very hard questions in terms of what does government do, because South Africans very jittery about touching their pension funds or anything else because they're of that trust deficit with government. So where does it leave government? Do they have to go out onto the international stage to borrow that money? But all of these conversations still to be had, much more to come here on SABC throughout the day as we cover SONA 2023.